The first time I stepped through the carved oak doors of the Silverroot Tavern, I thought I had stumbled into a medieval fantasy painting rather than the outskirts of an alien city. The tavern sat at the edge of Vaelthur, the oldest elven settlement on the planet Aldarion. But Aldarion wasn't some mythical world from storybooks. It was a frontier colony, one humanity had discovered only 100 years ago after the slipstream gates opened new paths through the stars. When the human surveyors first landed here, they expected trees, rocks, maybe a few strange animals. What they found instead were elves and orcs, living, breathing civilizations with histories stretching back tens of thousands of years. As a cultural liaison from Earth's diplomatic corps, I was supposed to study their traditions. Instead, I got dragged into a tavern war. Tavern. The Silverroot Tavern smelled of pine smoke, roasted venison, and the faint, sweet scent of mere wine, an elven drink that could numb pain and sharpen the senses at the same time. The interior looked ancient, with beams of polished living wood arching overhead like the ribs of a great beast. But every table glowed faintly, etched with runes that adjusted temperature, poured drinks, or played music when tapped in certain sequences. That was Aldarion, sorcery woven seamlessly with technology. Elves lounged at tables in embroidered cloaks, their silver hair reflecting firelight. In the corner, a bard strummed an instrument that projected holographic birds circling overhead. But opposite the elves, at the far side of the tavern, sat their natural enemies. Orcs. Broad-shouldered, tusked, their green skin marked with ritual scars, they filled the benches like armored boulders. Their laughter was loud, their mugs always full. Between them and the elves stretched a tense, invisible line. And right at the center of that line was me, a human outsider with nothing but a translator device pinned to my collar. Why I was there? My mission was simple: learn how the two species interacted in neutral ground. Taverns like the Silverroot were rare places where centuries of hatred were set aside, at least officially. "Observe, don't intervene," my supervisor had said. "The elves and orcs manage their own tensions. You're just a shadow, Daniel. But shadows don't drink." And on Aldarion, refusing a drink was considered an insult. So when an elf waitress handed me a cup of glowing green liquor called Lathril's Breath, I raised it in toast. Across the room, a massive orc warrior mirrored me with his own drink. His tusks gleamed, and his grin promised trouble. The spark started small. The orc slammed his mug down hard enough to rattle the rune table. An elf immediately sneered, muttered something sharp in their tongue, and the bard's holographic birds shifted into snarling wolves circling the orc table. I tried to melt into my seat, but then the orc pointed at me. "You," he barked in guttural common. "Human drinks with us. Not with tree liquors." The elves bristled. One of them, tall and elegant with eyes like molten silver, placed a hand on my shoulder. "He sits with us, stranger," she said smoothly. "Orcs drag their knuckles in mud. Humans have more sense." Dozens of eyes turned toward me. I was supposed to be neutral, non-interventionist, shadow. But both sides demanded a choice. And like an idiot, I chose neither. I stood up, raised my glass, and said, "Why not drink together? Humans on Earth did it all the time. That's what taverns are for, right?" For a heartbeat, silence. Then the orc roared with laughter. The elf woman narrowed her eyes. And just like that, the spark caught flame. The tavern war begins. The orc hurled his mug across the tavern. It smashed against a rune table, which retaliated automatically by flaring a shield of force that sent splinters of magic flying. An elf shouted a curse, flinging his own mug back like a missile. Within seconds, it wasn't just mugs. Chairs flew. Plates shattered. Spells lit the air like fireworks, countered by brute force orc throws that cracked beams overhead. And somehow, in the chaos, rules emerged. No blades. No killing. This wasn't war, it was tavern war. The elves unleashed vines from the walls to trip orcs. Orcs countered by ripping entire tables from the floor and using them as shields. Someone enchanted barrels of ale to explode like smoke bombs. Someone else conjured illusions of snarling beasts that made even seasoned warriors flinch. And me. I got dragged straight into the middle of it. The human wild card. The silver-eyed elf who had touched my shoulder grabbed my arm and shoved me behind her as she hurled a spell that wrapped an orc's legs in glowing thorns. You wanted unity, human. Fight with us, she shouted. The orc who had toasted me bellowed in answer, lifting me bodily and setting me on the bar like a trophy. Human fights with orcs. He has strength in him, I see it. Both sides pulled at me, both demanding I choose. But I wasn't trained for this. I wasn't a warrior or a spellcaster, or a diplomat skilled in combat mediation. I was just Daniel, a human with a stubborn streak. So I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed a half-empty wine bottle, hurled it straight into the rafters and shouted, "First one to spill my drink loses." The tavern froze. Then laughter rolled through both sides. And the war resumed, harder, faster, but with a new target. Protect the human's drink. Rising chaos. I watched in disbelief as elves cast protective wards around my mug, while orcs formed a living wall of muscle to block flying projectiles. The tavern shook with every impact, but both sides avoided the bar. Still chaos spread. The bard's illusions multiplied until wolves, dragons, and phantom soldiers battled across the ceiling. An orc crashed through the kitchen, emerging with a roasted boar he used as a weapon. An elf conjured shimmering copies of herself, confusing enemies long enough to append entire barrels of ale. And through it all, I clutched my drink like it was sacred. At some point I realized something strange. The anger in their eyes was gone. The snarls had softened into grins. The curses became competitive banter. The tavern war wasn't about hate anymore. It was about release, about turning centuries of hostility into a game. The turning point. Just when I thought it would burn itself out, the doors slammed open. In strode Irinder, commander of the Elven Guard, his golden armor shining even in the smoky haze. His hand rested on the hilt of his blade, and his gaze swept the wreckage with cold fury. "Enough," he thundered. "This ends now. Exit. Wolves, back to your homes. Human." His eyes landed on me like daggers. "You have brought disgrace into sacred halls." The tavern stilled. Orcs growled, ready to defy him. Elves bristled at his tone. I knew if he pushed, the fragile truce of play would snap back into true violence. So I raised my drink one last time. "With respect, Commander," I said, voice shaking. "It wasn't disgrace. It was unity." For once, orcs and elves fought side by side. Against me, against rules, against nothing that mattered. Look around. They're laughing.